Welcome to the People Data for Good podcast with Adamsen.
Hi, welcome back to the People Data for Good podcast. I have the honor of sharing time with Perri this afternoon. Perri, how you doing?
Pretty good. We're almost done with the week. Friday is tomorrow, no complaints. Weather is good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm like you said, we're in springtime, 2021. Here in California, at least in Northern California, the pandemic is. I don't know if receding is the right word, but we're able to move about a bit more, and there seems to be a degree of normalcy, and there's a lot of hope out there. And obviously, in the HR technology space, there's a lot of things happening, and that means us analysts are busier than ever, not only doing analytics, but thinking about the future and what systems we're going to be leveraging to do this work better and faster and at scale, for potentially, hopefully, more virtuous purposes, not only helping the organization, but helping individuals as well. And I know you're passionate about that too. So if you would introduce yourself and a little bit what you're going to be sharing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, I do oversee a workforce analytics team and also the operations in a company called WarnerMedia. So WarnerMedia might be a name that is relatively new to some folks, but it is a company comprised of all the brands that everyone probably are familiar, like the Warner Brothers, the Turner, the HBO. And you might have seen, out there in the market, like HBO Max is one of our biggest focus right now in the business, that direct consumer strategy. So a lot of great movies are on HBO Max. So that's the company I'm under. And of course, I said workforce analytics. So we basically a team under HR shared services. So my umbrella team is HR shared services. And we, support across the entire WarnerMedia. So about 30,000 employees. Like you said, it has been busy. What we have gone through last year, what's been picking up this year, and our company just goes through, never ending, transformations and emergent acquisition. So I do have to say that, it has been really busy. There are challenges, but it is also really exciting, right? When you have things that out of norm, you also have opportunities. You have area for innovation.
Yeah.
So I think for today, would love to share, and workforce analytics is in a passionate area of mine. Would just love to share more in that area.
Well, let's get into it, because you now, if you don't mind me saying, are a veteran of this discipline, having worked at Clorox and Accenture and at Warner Media for quite a number of years now. And you have grown and developed and created a sustainable capability. So I am really eager to learn from you, over the next 45, 50 minutes or so. And I'll also add that you have had some great experiences with Workday, and not to say that it's been all rosy, but you have really pushed the envelope in terms of the analytical capability with that as the basis. So, eager to explore that as well. Where I do want to start is, we're both here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and this past year has been tumultuous, not only with the pandemic, but with the pursuit of social justice and doing right by workers, protected classes. Diversity, equity, inclusion, in other words, is something that in organizations, it's not just a checkbox. It's something now that is a real priority. So, and particularly, if you don't mind me calling out, as an Asian woman in San Francisco, and obviously there's been a lot of news on that. Can you just share, how you feel personally about this particular topic and what you're doing to address it there in your professional role?
Yeah, that's a great question. First word come to my mind is actually exhausted. I want to say, like, that is the last year. Last year was a lot that happened last year, not just the pandemic, right? We're talking about Black Lives Matter. It was also a year of election. So like as a workforce that there is this physical feeling, that physical unsafetyness around, catching COVID, 100% of working from home, and the kind of adjusting all of that. And then if you think about, there's also there's this psychological safety that is happening with all these, events that are happening. I feel like last year, I learned so much about the history, about, the everything around the Black Lives Matter. And then fast forward to this year, with everything happened around, the API community, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. I'm exhausted. And what we do, like in terms of a workforce analytics team, we actually been partnered very, very closely with our so we have a team called Enterprise Inclusion Team. So they're focused on the inclusion, equity, and diversity. So ever since last year, and we start to partner with them, having these employee listening sessions where we collect the qualitative data. We also have surveys, period of time of surveys that are going out to get a pulse check, right, on employee, how they're doing in the initial of a pandemic, where everybody just start to work from home 100%. There's no preparation. There's like, it just happened. And then fast forward to now, like you said, right, we're starting to feel like a little bit become normal. Then we're using this survey to now do a pulse check to say, so how do employees feel about going back to work? What are the concerns on top of their mind? And in the conjunction with all the employee listening session around the equity and inclusion, we will, what I do in this space is, right, like not just as employee myself, have all these sentiment, have all these, just thinking around, but also what I can do to contribute. And the way I think about this is using the data to really use the data to surface, employee sentiment, what they're thinking, and also just to use the data to surface organization. Every organization here has an opportunity to see more, diversity population in the top of the organization. So how do we start, how do we surface more of these insights, really put in front of these decision makers, right? To say, hey, when we say we want an inclusive environment, what do we mean? What metrics are we using? So yeah, so it is, it's personally impacted, but also how I can, contribute to this topic with what we do.
You are, obvious. Well, let me just add context, because you have been at Time Warner for a number of years now. I would 4 or 5+ years, if I recall correctly. And
around 4 years.
4 years. And so you have developed a lot of internal credibility and relationship equity that you're now able to leverage. An example you just gave is you have this inclusion team, and they're willing and able to partner with you, and you're helping enable the ideas that they have and the initiatives that they have. And it's a beautiful thing. It's all too rare where DE&I, I think that's been a key inhibitor, is that they haven't had an enabler like an analytics team to put forth the data and show improvements and other things that are either not working or things that, hey, it's going well over here and we should do more of that, for example. So you were able to build credibility based on coming in and developing a vision in a clear way to achieve that vision, a roadmap, in other words. So can you speak to how you started your journey and how you got your key stakeholders excited about what you're doing and how you were able to build this relationship equity so you're now in this position to make fundamental change? Can you share your journey there?
Yeah, I mean, it's data. How could you not get excited?
That's how you earn credibility. Just say, hey, I love data.
Show up with data
and get the work done.
That's funny. Well, for practitioners like us, right? Like, I think you would agree. It does take a passion about data for you to really get into what you do. So I do think from my personal perspective, right? Like, I feel like the moment I start to, if I look at where I started out and where I am right now, that moment when I start to work with a massive amount of data, it's like when you meet your soulmate, you lock the eyes across the table, that's the one. And that's really how I feel about data. But if we put in the context of WarnerMedia, like how this practice went about, so it's going to be a little bit longer response, but I do want to give you that full insights into how we started. So 4 years ago, and that was when we started out under Warner Brothers. That was before all the acquisition happened, right? We're still under the legacy division, Warner Brothers, Turner, and the HBO. So I joined the Warner Brothers one-man team, and I talk lengthy discussion with my boss, my current boss, and then we actually, before I joined the company, we actually sat down, and that was in that was like feels so long time ago down in Burbank. We actually sat down, talk about like when we say we want to build out a workforce analytics, like what do we mean by that? What does success look like that, right? You can't just go from without any practice around the workforce analytics, like analytics in HR. You can't go from there overnight, just go like, oh, we're going to start to build a predictive modeling and all of that, because those are the shiny objects, right? People tend to go after. So we actually really put some thoughts to it, and we actually build a vision, build a roadmap. And in the roadmap, we actually breaking down in stages. Start with the foundation, which is your data quality, your system, right? Like, do you even have a single source of truth to begin with? Then we move along to enterprise understanding, have one set of metrics that all the HR are looking at. Then goes into differentiate insights, meaning that you have to allow flexibility, right, for the different business to be able to hone into their priority. Because if you look at a portfolio of our business, we tap into, the traditional, the entertainment, the movie, the production. We also in the games industry as well, like at the interactive technology. Now we're in this technology like a streaming, online streaming, and then we also have consumer product and all of that. So you have to allow the business to have that flexibility. So that's why we designed our third stage to be differentiated insights, then followed by the predictive, and then our North Star is machine learning and the AI. That's where I do believe the data shows its true power, that you can use the information to predict and then also to like build models to help make the decision, right? Those are more like a prescriptive. So if you visualize, right, that stage, that 5 stage, that's kind of our guiding principle that always kind of ground us to say, hey, everything we do, right, we need to kind of look at what are we trying to do, what are we trying to accomplish. And at the end of the day, I think our vision is we make an impact on the business. And I do think that's kind of keep me going every day, is being able to see the impact that the data was able to make and the analytic work is able to make.
But I mean, I love what you're saying, because you're calling out something that doesn't get called out all the time, is that what I hear is, start with the business problem. And I believe that's true. However, you can start with the business problem and go and try and do the analytics. Yet, if you don't have the requisite data, if you don't have the requisite systems and processes to bring that all together, package it, communicate it, all that stuff, then you can have the business problem, but you don't have the solve for the business problem. So I'm hearing that there's an and in there, that you have to put in the work to create the basis by which to go to your internal customers, have those discussions, and deliver. So my question for you, given that, did you do both at the same time? Did you spend a lot of time building and just getting the basics of the data dictionary, if I heard you right, and then, but also solve problems at the same time? Or did you just do the fundamentals for a while and then go to your internal customer groups? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's actually, so if you will ask me this question maybe a couple years ago, maybe a couple years into our journey, I would say like, yeah, like, we build a foundation, we focus on the foundation first, right? And also I would say the first good first 6 months, like a good chunk of time of my first 6 months at the Warner Brother, I also spend a lot of time with stakeholders because HR analytics is relatively new concept at the time at Warner Brother. So there's also a lot of relationship building and also educating. Like when you hear this again, when you hear HR analytics, what's in it for HR, right? Because you need them to be partner on this journey. I can't just look at the data, right? Not connecting with any of the qualitative context makes sense. So there's a lot of that happening. So if you asked me this 2 years ago, I would say, yeah, focus on the foundation, then you move on to, you know, the enterprise and all of that. Well, now I think anything that if you know, if anything I learned from last year on specifically on the journey and on the HR analytics is far from being linear. So because of the transformation our business did, we actually took a hit on the foundation. So we actually was able to make quite a bit of progress under Warner Brother that according to really start to build out the data scientist capability and start to look into the unstructured data sets. All the merger acquisition happened. So our foundation took a hit. So there's a gap in the data quality, in the integrity. We actually had to kind of take a step back to revisit the foundation, look at what the business needs are, basically going through iterative approach. But you have to accept that the fact that you actually do have to take a step back. So, you know, it's kind of my long answers to your question is that it's not linear, right? It's not that you do this portion first and then you move on. Things can happen in an iterative approach, but I do have to, I have to stress this every time. And I also have a hashtag for it. It's called the data is innocent. I cannot stress enough the importance of the foundation is your quality.
Yeah, we've known each other for a number of years, so I can say this. I want to hug you so much for saying that because there's so many narratives out there that seem very linear. Well, you solve a business problem and you build on that and you get the solution and all of a sudden, you know, you're getting high-fived going down the hall. And we know it's not like that. And it is iterative. It is a start and stop, and the world is dynamic. You know, there's acquisitions that happen. There's new systems that come into play. There's reorgs. You know, so all that affects our work. So, for you to have had the space, the time and space to take this iterative approach meant, in my narrative here, is that you had developed the internal credibility. You had accurately sold the real journey to your sponsors. So they weren't freaking out and say, oh, I thought this was going to happen. And we have to go back. So there's a sense of belief. And again, I'm certainly projecting right now shamelessly, but it has to be true or you wouldn't still be there. How do you feel? And I know you're a humble person, but I really am curious about this for our listeners because I think it's important for them to know. How did you build that credibility, that space, so you could, go and revisit the fundamentals, that you could have this iterative approach? Because that just doesn't happen for anybody. So how do you think that happened?
Yeah, thinking back, if I were to look back the 4 years of journey, right, I have been on, I want to say first foremost, I feel incredibly lucky that when I joined Warner Brother, I had a buy-in from my boss at the time and my boss right now, right? So she's head of HR services. I think she believes the value of having a workforce analytics. I think that's a really important first step, is already have some sort of buy-in from a senior leadership that believe this is the right thing to do, right? So more or less I come in like to build it out, like kind of focus on delivery and execution, right? I do have to spend time with other stakeholders within the company. But one thing I didn't have to worry is have to convince my boss, right, that why this is important. So I do want to, call that out, because I do feel like I'm incredibly lucky that I started off with already such a strong leadership support there. And the rest, in my mind, right, like for you to be able to, for your stakeholders be able to willing to come on this journey with you, you have to deliver, and you have to be able to show them the impact and have a tangible, like, again, going back to what I said before, is what's in it for them, right? You can't, you're not gonna have, people are really busy these days. They're not gonna just step in, you know, spend time with you just because they have nothing else to do, right? There is this like in it for them component that it's really important as a discipline for my team, right? Cover from a operational reporting, analytic program, data scientist stuff that we do, everything along the journey, right? Everything along the deliverable we do, we always have to making sure the insights is valuable. So we're not just showing pretty charts or you know, what have you. We tell a story, we connect with what they tell us, we do this upfront discovery, and we deliver things that they actually can action on. That's a really important. Everything we put in front of our internal stakeholders, we actually ask ourselves the question first is, what they're gonna do with this?
Right.
Like, does this lead to some sort of action? So I think that discipline, it really grounded us to making sure, you know, our stakeholders have that trust, right, in us, that knowing what we put in front of them is something that they can use. So that's really my take on how, you know, I continue to build this internal, right, the community, and build this like reputation with our stakeholders.
Yeah, you know, love what you're sharing, and it's immensely appropriate, and it's also not easy to do. So congratulations on making that happen over time, because there are a lot of stakeholders, there are a lot of internal customers. They're not all proficient with data and use of storytelling and so forth. So there is a lot of coaching and training. Correct me if I'm wrong. So my question is this: is that, you know, in a large organization like yours, the challenge of prioritization comes up, you know, very quickly. What problems do I solve? Who do I solve them for? You know, where do I put my scarce resources, both people, technology, and budget, of course. So can you share a little bit about how you prioritize in the midst of all the demands being put on you and your team?
Yeah, let me just start to say not easy, especially last year. It's, you know, I mentioned that every one of us is working from home full time, right? And we have our day-to-day operation, right? We have our day-to-day kind of that deliverable we need to do. On top of that, we also continue to do merger and acquisition. So Workday, right, being another component you mentioned earlier, Workday being another component under my kind of purview, is that we also want to continue to making sure we bring the population into Workday from an implementation standpoint, so project-based. So you have your kind of day-to-day, then you also have a project. So, you know, I actually think a prioritization, it has always been a challenge. I don't have a silver bullet for it at all. Other than, I think, just making sure we stay, like, I mentioned a lot the word discipline, right? Like I do think that's something we have to always keep back in our head, is that it's easier for you to kind of, when somebody come to you, right, with a problem, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Let me take a look at the data. Let me do whatever. And then like you said, if one person come to you, one stakeholder come to you, it's fine, right? But when you have this environment, and we're coming off an environment that all the legacy division come together for the very first time, right? They have always been legacy kind of autonomy, right, under Time Warner, but now coming under WarnerMedia, they operating as a one company. Everybody still, right, more or less, right, because it's a change curve. Everybody more or less like, I want to look at things in this way. Well, I want the metrics to show up this way. Well, I want to pivot data in this way, right? You have all these stakeholders. It's all customized, right? The approach, like what they wanted you to do. So we're very good at, you know, one thing I do think our team is good at is that because we service the entire company, we have a visibility into all these requests. So we're able to see the overlap. We're able to see the pattern. So we actually proactively deliver to say, hey, this set of metrics or this analytic package cover 80% of what you're all asking. Let's go there first. And then let's prioritize these like 20% of these kind of exception based. I mean, that's kind of like, it's not a scientific way to prioritize. I wish I can throw everything in the model and the model can just tell us like, oh, you need to work on this first and then next first. But it's not like that. But that's kind of like just, a simple way for us to say like, hey, what we do, what's the level of impact? If that impact is like 80% of organization, let's focus there first versus focus that 20% of the organization.
Yeah, what I want to call out and celebrate about what you're sharing is that you are accepting where you are in terms of the data availability, the data quality, the tools that you have at your disposal, and making the most of that. There is a pursuit of, bright light, cool tool. There is a place. I mean, there's so much innovation happening in the space, and I certainly honor and celebrate that. And there's a place for new tools. However, grossly underutilizing existing tool sets is arguably happening more than most. And one of the things that I hear a lot is the limitations of the transactional system, the core HCM. And so can you speak to Workday specifically to the extent that you feel comfortable and how you have leveraged its capability to deliver on the promises that you just referred to?
Yeah, so, Workday, one thing is that I think if you think about just bigger picture, a company spend a lot of money to go from one system to another system. That's a quite costly activity, right? Coming off whether you go from PeopleSoft to Workday or Workday to PeopleSoft or SAP and what have you, that upfront investment, the cost of the system, the cost of the project, the cost of the implementation, all of that. So that is something that I always keep in back of my mind is that you're right. There's so many tools out there. There are going to be tools that for a feature is going to be much better than what you have now. But if you look at holistic, right, when you put so much investment into going onto ERP system, like why not get the most out of the system versus easily kind of get distracted to say, here's another cool tool, here and there. There are times where we're leveraging other tools that we cannot leverage Workday. But one of the things, so I mentioned it before, how we build out the roadmap, the foundation, the enterprise differentiate. I'm going to quiz you later at the end. You have to tell me the
I'm ready. I'm taking notes.
So yeah, so foundation, enterprise, right? Differentiate, insights, predictive, and machine learning AI. We actually build the same roadmap, align each of the Workday product against each stage. So we're saying that foundationally, we can leverage Workday's security model, the business processes, the foundational data management. Enterprise, we can leverage the dashboard, the delivered dashboard or custom dashboard. And then when you go on to more of a advanced stage, you can start to look at their, people analytics product, their prison analytics, where you can bring external data. So again, right, like I think we're very methodical about kind of how we want this to be successful and how we can use Workday as an enabler. And not, reality is we can do everything in Workday because some of the work our data scientists do, we cannot do in Workday. Right. And some of the presentation, right, we have to do in front of stakeholder, the storytelling, you can't do it with a dashboard. You really have to thinking through how you want to tell the story. Those are not the things that we're doing in Workday, but that doesn't take away that you kind of look at your ecosystem of that company. And this is where the system side coming in, is you looking for, like we being the enabler to other organizations by delivering insights, but what's our enabler? Like from a technology platform, right? What's our enabler to help us to become more scalable, to do more of a self-service? So that's really that would be my point of view, is that how we were able to use Workday, but also recognize the product roadmap against our roadmap, but also recognize there are going to be areas that you have to look outside the system to deliver what you wanted to deliver to the business.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. And I want to get into your personal story in a minute, but I want to ask one more question about what's going on for you currently there at WarnerMedia, because you've shared several times around this notion of stakeholder relationship management and storytelling, which in turn drives change downstream. And I hear from many others that it's a challenge to educate and enable HR business partners, COE leads, people managers, leaders on how to actually have an appetite for this information and in turn use it independent of an analyst, coaching him or her, so that, again, confident engagement with the data. So I'm going to put forth a scenario is that many come in and look at a dashboard and try and tell a story based on the data. And they arguably don't spend enough time staying curious about the change that they're trying to make downstream and actually coming to that data set looking for something. And granted, it's an and because they might find something that they didn't suspect. However, if you come to a dashboard or report or just a data set in general with a certain hypothesis you're going to test or a certain insight that you're looking to see if it's there, and it's like myth busting or myth validation. But can you speak to what you're doing to elevate the confidence of those who are interacting with the reports and dashboards that you and your team are creating?
Yeah, so I do have to say though, our HR business partners and also our COE. So we have HR business, like how the kind of HR organization. You have the HR practitioners, the HR business partners and managers and generalists and all of that. Then we also have the COE group where handle total rewards, talent acquisition, organization development, employee experience, all of that. My experience so far that we actually have quite a bit mix of the skill sets within that group, because we actually will have HR come to us that they are already quite advanced in terms of what they understand about analytics, what they want to get out of it. And they actually will come to us, like example, right? One of the HR supporting our games function just come to us with this massive set of exit interview, which is all unstructured data, which we love it. Because I do think unstructured data give you more insights than structured data. So that's I'm just put a little
finding your
there.
soulmate across the table.
Yeah, that's
data,
a very strong
data.
soulmate. Yeah, because like when people are not confined in the drop-down type of responses, when they're just given this open-ended platform, you get a lot of insights out of it. So he came to us with this massive set of unstructured data, and then he was like, I want to know the sentiment, I want to know the themes, I want to know, like, we're like, cool, like put our data scientists on it. So you do have that type of profile. I would call it persona too. Like we're trying to define our strategy around the persona, like the consumers of the data. But then you also have folks that they're not well versed in the data, right? Sometimes if you put things in front of them, you will intimidate them or overwhelm them. So one thing, so with folks like the example I gave you around the games, we love it. We're just like, we're all over it, right? Like that's a very easy kind of the work together. But for the HR practitioners or COE members that a little bit shy away from data, there are a couple of things we've done in our organization. And again, like it may work or may not work in other organizations, but at least that's something we've tried, is that one is we call it, we borrow the term from Workday actually, called the knowledge bites. So we'll create like very short videos, talk about like, here's what you can do with the dashboard. Here's what you can come with a question. Like you mentioned the word hypothesis. We actually use that as a example with our HR, is that when you look at the dashboard, come with a question, like what question you try to answer. Don't try to interpret the dashboard, but think about what question you have in your head. So we use those little short bites of like on-demand video to make it more digestible for them. We also have we call it the HR intensive training that actually happened last year with all the Black Lives Matters timeframe, where we want to equip HR, right, how to have those conversations with the leaders who are making key decisions on our people. So one of the segments is how they can use data to surface the insights and facts. So we use those platforms, partner with other team like the enterprise inclusion team to do those training. And then we also have what we call the office hour. So we create some of these office hour. So the HR can come in and they can come with a question. They can come with like a real problem they try to solve, a real question they try to answer, and we're walking them through. So those are, those kind of like tips, tricks, I was sure it takes time. It's, again, I don't want, the audience or listener to feel like, oh, if I do that, tomorrow, my HR will be just looking at the dashboard like, oh, I know everything's going on. It takes time.
Well, just for you to share that openly, I appreciate it. And I'm sure listeners do too, because to your point, it's not easy. And the fact that you have formed personas is a heightened level of empathy and appropriateness when you address them. So, I certainly want to call that out and celebrate it. I want to get your take on where the discipline is going, what the future of people analytics and future of work is going to look like from your perspective. But I first want to understand, your personal journey, because this work, as you and I have discussed, is not easy. Everything that you just described is like, there's this special level. Yes, you have to love data, but there's a tenacity that you have to have. There's a lot of people that you have to convince that it can be esoteric, it can be intimidating. But you have obvious passion around this. So how did you get to where you are? I mean, what's your educational background? What was your journey to become the head of human capital management analytics at WarnerMedia?
Yeah, you're gonna love this. So my major in my undergrad, I graduated with a major in Italian, the language.
Totally expected.
Yeah. My dream, when I graduated, actually I graduated here in the Bay Area, my dream at that time was gonna move to Italy, drinking wine, eat cheese every day. Now that clearly did not happen.
Yeah, you missed by about 6,000 miles.
Yeah, it clearly did not happen. But yeah, that was actually my education background. I graduated in a major that had nothing to do with what I do today. But I want to say that, after I graduated, I started out at Mercer, which is the management consulting firm. And that was the first time I started to get exposed to survey data, because Mercer does a lot of survey and they're known for their surveys, right? Mm-hmm. I was just like fascinated by the fact that, if you just do a simple aggregation, the insights right off the bat, you don't need to do like very complex, things, right? Sometimes you just do some aggregation, you start to see the pattern, the insights. I think that really fascinates me. Mm-hmm. And I know that at that time, what I also noticed is that analytics is actually quite advanced in areas like marketing, sales, PSO, and all of that technology. But HR somehow because Mercer also is work with a lot of HR practitioners. What I noticed that within HR, sometimes data almost considered as a liability versus opportunity. Mm-hmm. So that kind of got me further down, right, into this analytic field, but also further down to the people side of data. Because I feel like, at the end of the day, you would agree that the people is probably the number one asset of a company. Mm-hmm. Like, why not leverage the data you have, right, on your number one asset to drive the insights that can do a better things for our employee, whether increase the experience, the engagement, and what have you. So that's kind of how I shifted from wanting to drinking wine and eat cheese every day to like, you know what, I'm gonna really get into this field where I think analytics is underutilized, which is that, people analytics field. And then after that, like I got into Workday, the system side, right now I feel like, okay, I'm on this track, but initially it was really big a pivot for myself. But that's always, I also tell people, for folks like junior folks that are trying to get into this field who don't have that kind of that, I want to say like, they didn't come from education background that is in like software engineering or data science or whatever, but they're interested to pivot this field. And I always tell them, just look at me, right? Like if I can pivot, you can too. So that's kind of how I got to where I am right now.
Well, it's a fantastic story, and it's also interesting because I know you're good at math. I just know it. And you obviously know technologies as well. And it sounds like that's something that you've learned over time. And that's where I want to call out, because you have always struck me, number one, as a learner. Like you just stay in perpetual state of curiosity, that beginner's mindset, which I think is so important for those in our discipline. But you're also tenacious and you're also creative. And so, with the Italian language background and the fact that you know numerous languages, so can you speak to those attributes, specifically that last one, the need to be creative in our discipline? Because many are just like, okay, I'm going to plug this in and it's going to work, or I'm going to grab that data and there's going to be the insight. But their need, analytics, correct me if I'm wrong, from your perspective, is inherently a very creative discipline. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, especially in HR field, right? Because to the kind of point I made earlier is that you tend to think about people data as like, what's my retention policy? When do I need to get rid of the information, right? So I think because I was able to see the power of the data when I started getting to the field under Mercer, then I moved down to Clorox, where I really started getting to HR analytics. It's just that, the opportunity is there. Like it just doesn't make sense for you to walk away from the opportunity that is there. So it does take that curiosity. I think, when I look for folks join our team that are doing the analytic work, I look a lot for that curiosity, like that intellectual curiosity of folks and a kind of how they also articulate. So I do think of me having that background and, in a language, right? Like kind of has nothing to do with the technical piece, give me that balance kind of between being able to be a technical, being that business analyst or analyst period, but also kind of understand my user, understand the persona, like you said before, to really personalize their needs for the analytics. And when you kind of have that in your mind, you constantly look for ways to innovate. You will constantly look what way to innovate and improve. And again, I'm keep referencing last year, right? Last year is a very disruptive year. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
We all can agree on that, right? So, but when I also look at, I think the silver lining from last year is whenever you have disruption, you have innovation. Mm-hmm. If you look at the things kind of happen in the market, anytime you have a disruption, you have innovation. So you just cannot let those opportunity like just kind of walking by you and not grab it. So yeah, I guess my point is that continue to be curious of what you do, and analytics does require you to be curious, but also like whenever there's disruption, don't get discouraged. Think about what that disruption leads to is kind of door opens to an opportunity. And that's how we've always look at our business, kind of everything that is happening.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And it actually leads into the theme that I'd like to discuss as we get close to wrapping up here, and that's where we're going with not only our discipline, but just generally how we strategize how work gets done. And let me preface it in this way. To your point, COVID and the pandemic in general has forced us to bring HR together with facilities, together with legal, together with digital transformation, automation, and procurement. To we have outsourced providers and contractors and things like that. And now we're looking at return to workplace. And so I'm just interested from your perspective, not only what's happened there at WarnerMedia over this kind of transition time, if you will. Do you think many of the processes and ways of doing things that came up during the pandemic are going to persist moving forward? Namely, the idea that you're bringing these formerly disparate groups together, maybe on a more frequent, recurring basis. What's your ideal future state over the next 6 to 12 months for your discipline there at WarnerMedia?
Yeah, when I was listening to this question, I think what the first word come to my mind is actually flexibility. Mm-hmm. So if anything, if you think about what happened right in the last 12 to 18 months, you got to adapt to the change faster than you ever wanted to, right? So you could argue that change probably is the only constant for the last 12 to 18 months, especially in our organization where there's constant merger and acquisition and transformation that is going on. Mm-hmm. So be flexible. Like I that's something we also try to talk to our HR, talk to our leadership, is that the traditional ways of doing things, because we do have, Warner Brother, WarnerMedia, all the division, they've been around for a long time, right? Yeah. There's quite a bit executives, they're old school, and they used to, we used to have to convince them that, hey, we need to give employee the flexibility to be able to work from home, to be able to telecommute, and there were resistance in our senior leadership. Then COVID happened, everyone worked from home, things still get done. And you're like, okay, so now you tell me this is not gonna work, right? So yeah. I think that's like silver lining out of that. Another silver lining out of that is the leadership has to understand that the workforce today and the workforce tomorrow needs that flexibility. You gotta be able to respond things fast. And the other thing come to my mind is that if I were just honing more into the workforce analytics area, I think, and I'm actually, this is what I've been inspired from our business strategy. So last year, out of everything happened, we also had a new CEO, and Jason Kyler, right? He came from Hulu. So he came in to really drive that direct to consumer, that business model, and to go global. So we're no longer competing, right, with the traditional entertainment media company. We're also competing with technology company for online streaming. Mm-hmm. So if I take that, and if I think about workforce analytics, how do we also go direct to consumer? Could that be the trend coming up, is that instead of delivering insights to the HR, the HR go to the business, the leader and all of that, or a manager, can you even leverage system or technology more to deliver that insights directly to consumer, and then have our HR focus on the decision-making part? And I'm just talking at this point because I just think that
you're doing more than that. I could not agree more, both given my hope for what happens in our discipline. Mm-hmm. I have increasing confidence based on my perspective that it is a trend. I'm hearing it more consistently, not only as one-off, but as a systematic strategic approach. So no, I certainly celebrate it. After all, correct me if I'm wrong from your perspective, we're talking about people's data. They are generating the data. Granted, it's being captured by systems that are owned by these enterprises. Mm-hmm. But if I know my data is being captured and it's not delivering value back to me, how does that feel? So what you're sharing is a great opportunity to build trust, to build enablement and empowerment, all these other wonderful things. So yeah, I'll clap right here. I'm clapping.
And remember, hashtag data is innocent. Don't forget, as we progress, don't forget the importance of your, credibility in the integrity and the quality of your data.
Yeah, I just have a couple more questions, Perry. I mean, it's super enjoyable to connect with you like this. And I just want to ask, when we talk about the future of people analytics, we have, this ecosystem of work, as I alluded to earlier. And so, in other words, work is getting done not only by employees, but it's being done by contractors, AI, outsourced providers, scale up startups. There's a bunch of ways for work to get done. And so, what do you think the role of people analytics leaders and the discipline in general is going to be to help facilitate these discussions around how work is going to get done in the future? Your thoughts there?
Yeah, that is a great question, because as we speak, we actually internally talked about kind of as we continue to making sure what we deliver matches the business strategy, right? Like we're not doing something that's out of line with where business is going, our workforce is going. Extended the workforce actually come up quite a lot. Even you'd be surprised that even maybe you're not, but even with extended worker, we also start to think about the DEI component of it, because more or less you could argue that's a pipeline, right? That's either a pipeline for your regular workforce, where you have these contingent workforce that convert to the regular workforce. But that is also another workforce that are doing work for your company. Like, how do you making sure that that population also gets the coverage from a diversity, from equity, from an inclusion standpoint? And extended the workforce is also a place where you can think about the skills, basically the trend of the skill demand of your organization. So we actually have done analysis using our extended workforce to kind of compare like what areas we tend to engage extended workforce, what are the skill sets, right? We're looking for them to add value, and how does that compare to our existing workforce? And when you lay on the cost component to it, that's where you're getting to the strategic workforce planning, which actually you can really harness that data to understand, where the demand, like what the skill sets demand is. So those, I would say, the diversity, inclusion, and equity, and then that whole kind of strategic workforce, those are two big kind of business focus. And I want to making sure, right, the work we do is supportive of those two areas. So the contingent work, the extended workforce is quite interesting topic. It's actually getting quite a bit of attention, at least in our organization.
That's great to hear. And I love that you're looking at that from a DEI perspective as well. I think this is immensely appropriate, and it's been a missed opportunity for many organizations. So I have one more question, and me being me, I might sneak in one more, but it's really, I'm going to ask it in two ways. One from an HR leader perspective is like, if I am going to hire somebody or a team of people to do this work, people analytics, workforce planning, what is some of the qualities that I'm going to look for? And the other perspective for the same question is, how would you advise people to learn about this discipline and become more proficient and effective in doing this work? What would you advise on both counts?
So I'm actually going to go back to one of your earlier questions. I actually don't think I did a good job answering that. Is you mentioned that this is a hard work, right? Like kind of what keeps me going every day to show up at work. We show up at home, show up to the computer, show up to the screen. But what keeps me going, like believe the work we do and all of that. So I think, tie back to this question you ask now, I think first foremost, you got to believe the value. Like I truly believe the impact, right, of what workforce analytics or HR analytics can do, and the insights it's being surfaced have direct impact on the business. So, and you have to be able to prove that relationship using the data, using the deliverable, using the kind of the relationship building and all of that. So I do think that's what's keeping me going, because I like the sense of making the impact, right? Not just checking the box, but the sense of you're making the impact through the work you do, that's engaging. So for someone that, you know, wanted to start out in this journey from a personal perspective, from business perspective, I would truly to ask the question, right? Like, is there belief in kind of the value and all of that? I think that that's like a prerequisite of what you kind of going into. Then I think after that, you know, some of the tactical things that, you know, at least from my perspective, when I look for, when we started out this 4 years ago, but we also, you know, as I mentioned, it was a one-man team, right? To where we are today, where we had the reporting analyst, you know, the analytics kind of focus on analytical program analyst to the data scientist. When we build this team, when we continue this journey, we bring people on that, you know, be curious, of course, to have the technical background that is desired, but the curiosity and the ability to be able to tell a story, those are some attributes that we actually always look for in terms kind of join our journey and join our team to make it more successful, and having a roadmap. So that's what I will always recommend, is that you can't just say that, hey, we're gonna get into workforce analytics, we're gonna do this, and yes, it's gonna happen. So having the upfront, being kind of methodical about what success look like, what the roadmap and what all of that, I personally truly benefited from that exercise we did earlier on, and the belief that it's iterative, it's not linear. Set your own expectation, right? So you don't get discouraged when your foundation took a back or what have you. So those are what just, you know, couple comments, you know, I was sure it's not a rainbow or butterfly. Like, it's not you know, it's not that this is a hard work. You're gonna hit roadblocks, you're gonna hit challenges, you're gonna have a setback, but having that, you know, be your guiding principle helps to become that guideline, the North Star that you're going towards.
Absolutely love it. And again, me staying true to my word, I am going to sneak in one more question. It's simple. It's going to be short. How do you learn? How do you continue to stay on top of this very dynamic profession?
Go to your conferences.
That's a wrong answer. It's not the wrong answer. It's not. I was not teeing that up for that reason.
No. I'm just joking. Well, joking, not joking. But I will make a more complete answer. So what helped me to continue to learn, and also just initially, right, when I tried to pivot into this field, influencers like Josh Bersin, for example, and there's actually a lot of resource out there. I was thinking, right, I was talking about HR analytics being a relatively new area. If you think about analytics in general in other area, when I dig into more, I mean, folks like Josh Bersin, he started this long time ago, and he actually accumulated quite a bit resources that is actually available to folks like us that are wanting to get into. And you know, again, like I do want to mention the conferences that I ever attend, a couple conferences you hosted, and I've gone to other conferences. Being in that community, kind of always making sure you're stay on top of the trends. Be curious of what other companies doing, right? Like, I have a visibility into what we do, what we have done, what we're doing, and what we wanted to do. But all of that is also influenced by what I see in the kind of what other folks are doing. And I find those conferences helpful is because that it's not that you're there watching the presentation or listen to, but that's also kind of so like a social environment. You build that network, right? Like, there's the people I can reach out if I feel like I needed help, or if I just wanted to kind of sense check, right? Like, you know, what they think about things that we're doing. That's a form of learning. So you know, other than the schools and the books, you know, there's that pure learning right out there, and the resources out there. So it's you being disciplined, right? Wanting to get into it, wanting to continue to making sure you stay on top.
Well, yeah, Perri, thank you for the kind words. And yes, I couldn't agree more around the connection. There are so many innovative, good, accomplished people in this discipline who are eager to share and serve as collaborative thinking partners. So yeah, thank you for calling that out. And thank you for sharing today, because you're a perfect example of that very fact. And so I really, respect and appreciate the way you show up. And thank you for taking the time to share today. As we wrap
Absolutely.
here, any closing comments, and how can people learn more about you and what you're doing?
Well, if anyone is interested to discuss more, my LinkedIn is out there. Feel free to feel free. And I have, again, the data is innocent stickers ready. I actually did print a lot of those out. To a point, I was giving to everybody in HR, my team. So, if you're ever interested to get a sticker, reach out.
I want a sticker.
No, I will send a couple to you. But yeah, I mean, thank you for having me. And it's a topic that it's very natural for me to talk about. And every time, when I can talk about HR analytics and analytics in general, right? It's always fun. Like this just has been a very fun conversation. So I just want to say that thank you for having me on this too.
Okay. Well, thank you. And in terms of conferences, maybe we can see one another, if not before January of next year. We're likely going to do an in-person event. January 26th and 27th are the tentative dates here in the Bay Area.
Awesome.
So would love to have you back and share at that forum. So we'll see. Hopefully we can make it happen and make it safe for everybody. But
yeah,
until then,
safe first. Yeah.
Perri, yet again, thank you. You be well, and I'll see you soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for joining the People Data for Good podcast with Adamsen. To find other podcasts, videos, upcoming events, and to join the People Data for Good movement, please visit us at PAFOW.net.